This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stock Box interview.
Well, joining us today is George Roach, the CEO of Premier African Minerals. Thank you very much for joining us again today, George. How are things? How are you feeling?
Yeah, Mark, I'm okay. It's always good to be talking to you. Excuse me. But
Indeed.
health-wise, yes, we're fine.
Good. Well, of course, we want to get a general update really on how things are going on site. Of course, the HydroSizer that was due, you've had UV sorters which have been installed. There's a video on the public domain of those UV sorters running. But recent RNS stating that all the parts of the plant are running, bar the milling section circuit. So what's going on at the moment with regards to these newer elements that have arrived and are being installed or have been installed in the milling circuit?
All right, let me just step back from directly into the milling circuit for the moment. And let me say that the installation of the UV sorters is going to improve the spodumene concentrate that goes to the milling section. The effect of that is that once it passes through the milling section, the amount of spodumene that is going to the flotation plant should be increased. And this should give us better grades and more tonnage. Coming back to the milling section itself, as I've said before, the milling section is required to produce around about 40 tons an hour at minus 150 micron for the flotation circuits. And it's in that context that we recently called the force majeure, that there are issues there that really I don't want to dwell too much on the technical aspects of it. Suffice it to say that we have good, solid legal and specialist opinions that confirm that it is a force majeure case. Under the circumstances, we're doing the best we can, and so are Stock, and it's really their responsibility. It remains their responsibility. So with the current status, they are able to push through a limited tonnage of material correctly sized. That then moves into the hydroclassifier or HydroSizer, which is an efficient piece of equipment that is intended to separate the material that is correctly sized. This 150 micron. 150 micron is a 15th of a millimeter, just to put it into perspective. So it's very small, and it correctly sizes this, takes it out, and sends it on its way to the flotation circuit. The really good things about the HydroSizer on the one side and the UV sorter on the other is that when the milling section is resolved, there's really great news sitting and waiting on each side of it. That should see very good quantities and tonnages going to flotation with a significant improvement there.
Okay, fantastic. So the UV sorter is installed and that improves the feed grade to the milling circuit. You were targeting a little over 2%, I think, from memory. Is that right? You want to get through?
Well, the bench that is being mined at the moment at Zulu is running at 1% lithium oxide equivalent. And if between the sorters we can achieve an upgrade to take it to 2%, I think we've got a fabulous feed going into the flotation section.
Yeah, okay. But as of yet, you wouldn't say it's at that, you can't declare it's at that sort of 2% level at the moment?
No, I can't. But that's probably as much a factor that our own on-site assay is almost commissioned now. And probably it's a matter of days and we'll be able to go back with our own assays instead of waiting for other problems in country to resolve the assay.
So that's the on-site lab?
Yeah, that's our own assay lab there. I'm pretty confident that that's where we are.
In a few days. Okay, that's good to hear because I know people were keen to know when that was going to be on stream to get some grades there. So the HydroSizer has been installed, has it? And it's working okay? Okay. Now, I think from memory, last time we spoke, that should get the plant throughput to 50%, but I'm getting the feeling it's probably not there at the moment. Now, I think from a recent RNS, Stark have confirmed they intend to produce spodumene from the plant over the course of July 23. So, I mean, is the plant producing? Is it currently running? Are the expected modifications working as they should?
Yes, I think they are. I'm aware of Stark's commentary in terms of what they expect to produce. I think that towards the end of this week we'll know.
Okay.
Does the plant have the capability of producing concentrates? Yes, we've proved that one. We're comfortable with that aspect of it.
Okay, so towards the end of this week, we should get a number from Stark on what is actually running through. Okay, so we'll get an idea of how successful they've been on that. Okay, that's good to hear. On the mill, George, of course, the EDS mill, we were talked about liberating the spodumene crystals there. It's very good at that, but what it's not so good at is what the hydro classifier then sends as the wrong size back. It's not very good at then reprocessing that. So I think the idea was to almost stockpile some of that or until such time as you're able to go through and process it again. But the EDS mill at the moment is okay. It's running. There's no problems there, is there?
No, it's not that there are no problems. Going to the heart of the force majeure issue, all centered around the EDS mill and some of the periphery on each side of it. So it's not entirely resolved, not by any manner of means. But that's something that in the course of the next period of weeks, we should be able to get right. And hopefully within the course of 14 weeks, as I've projected, be able to lift this force majeure and be back at full production.
Right, okay, so hopefully not too long to be able to get that force majeure lifted. With regards to sorting out the milling issues, what are the plans that Prem have got in place? You talked to me last time, I think, about getting another mill installed?
Yes, I believe that it's going to require the installation of another mill. Now, this is Stark's responsibility to get this mill in. As an interim stopgap, Premier does have another mill sitting at our RHA project in Zimbabwe. That mill is a rod mill. The capacity is a little lower than I think it needs to be, but it's a very convenient mill. It's up the road about 400 kilometers away. Sorry, that's not quite up the road, but it's not that far away. And there are already people on site at RHA busy decommissioning that mill. And we expect to load that mill and bring it to Zulu in the course of the next week to 10 days. And then with some installation work, a little bit of civils, a little bit of maintenance on gearboxes and various other things, that could go a long way to alleviating some of this pressure and increasing the tonnage into the flotation plant. So I think that'll be a very important step as a precursor to the eventual final solution, which is, as I say, about 14 weeks away.
14 weeks away, and that is Stark's responsibility there to get that sorted. Okay, could that be a bore mill solution?
Likely, yes.
Okay, I know someone did have a query about concerns about iron getting in there, but there is an iron, a mag sep, isn't there? That's
Yeah, no, there's a magnetic separation phase that follows the milling phase.
Yeah.
It is at the moment, it's a low intensity magnetic separator. It pulls all the iron out. That's likely to have to change to a high intensity magnetic separator to pull out the tantalum as well, which was always previously envisaged.
Okay, that's fine. That all makes sense. Okay. So, of course, the force majeure is in effect, and I think there's a couple of days left. It's the 27th of July from the last communication that you had with Canmax, I think, that they can then refer to a dispute. But the letter that you received also noted they wanted friendly negotiations. So, I mean, have there been any positive discussions with Canmax in order to resolve their concerns?
Well, I think let me make this point that in my personal personal view, we did not need to get to this stage with Canmax. I think that it's a case of inappropriate knee-jerk reactions in some ways. My understanding is that Canmax wants product. And from Prem's perspective, we want to produce it. We want to receive a fair price for it. Canmax pre-purchased product and they're entitled to it. And it's Prem's obligation to supply them with product as per the pre-purchase or to make a repayment. Now, the force majeure is in situ, and the force majeure effectively stays any other action and stays our requirements under the agreement and their ability to cancel the agreement or any of those things. So that's where we are at this stage. If the parties do not agree and there is a dispute that arises, under the agreement, there is an obligation that the parties enter into a 10-day period of friendly negotiations intended to resolve the dispute. So Canmax advice to us last week was that there clearly was a dispute and that we clearly should enter into friendly negotiations with a view to trying to resolve this. So an initial meeting has been held. It was extensive and I think it was productive. Subsequent to that, there has been an initial set of potential proposals put on the table for evaluation. There is friendly negotiation and discussion that is ongoing as per the undertaking, as per the agreement, and as per what we are doing. We are still within that 10-day period. I think that with the intention of both parties being to see this resolved so that Prem can produce as per the agreement, Canmax can receive product as per the agreement, we can liquidate the prepayment as was intended. Our intentions are aligned, and we are, as I say, we are at this point where I think that there is a potential to resolve this. That has always been the case, but we are talking and we are in a friendly negotiation.
Okay, well, that's good to hear that you're talking and a potential to resolve this. Are you able to share any details of what was discussed, even at high level, George? No. Okay.
No, not even at the low level, not even at any level. I can't.
Okay.
I simply cannot. It is not a determined, it is not a definitive thing. The moment there is something definitive, it'll be in an RNS immediately, whichever it is, if it's good or bad or whatever it is.
Okay, but it is a friendly and proactive negotiation or discussions that are happening from both parties.
The negotiations are friendly. We are talking to each other decently. Nobody's been rude to anybody.
Okay.
And I think that our objectives are clear. What we want to do. We want to produce and sell fairly. Canmax wants to secure product.
Okay, thank you. At what point does the force majeure end, George? Is that once, is it 100% nameplate, or is that when the problems with the mill are sorted and officially announced?
No, it's when the problems with this intermediate milling situation and everything around it is resolved. I'm fairly comfortable that the solution is pretty clear as to what we should do. I'm pretty comfortable with a 14-week period. That's pretty well where it's going to be. I'm doing the best we can in the interim to try and alleviate the stresses and problems associated with it. But that's really where it is. And that's a fairly short window, actually.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Now, just coming back to the state of the plant for a minute, you did say that hopefully by the end of the week or so, we will hear what the actual figures are. Do you know if the plant is running at the moment?
I'm not at site at the moment. I must be frank with you. I left there on very early hours of Saturday morning. I needed to get back to my office. There were so many things that had to be done. So I am a little out of touch over the last couple of days. So I really, there's not much I can comment on in terms of that at the moment.
Okay. I did hear from something that was going on the other night, apparently from Stark, that they did say they've managed to achieve 18 hours of continuous production, but this hasn't been form. Do you wish to comment on that, or?
I can't comment on that.
Okay.
Not at this stage.
Well, that's apparently what was said. So we'll have to wait and see until they officially inform you, and then of course you can RNS that. I think something else that came from that was, and I know we talked about this last time, is your concern that the bagging that had already been done had an elevated level of mica, and you wanted to sort of take that out. But from some of the information that I sort of received was that a lot of the mica has now been visibly removed, and the product's looking very white than how it should look spodumene wise. Able to comment on that at all?
Mark, I think there may be a little bit of clarity that's needed on that. And I'm going to step back. From a technical perspective, the flotation circuit is broken into two components. The one is concerned with the removal of micas, which includes lepidolite, and the other is concerned with the floating of spodumene. Now, to remove the mica components and suppress the floating of spodumene at the same time, the pH needs to be reduced to approximately 2, between 2 and 2.5. If it isn't, then spodumene that is contained in that tank will float together with the micas. And when you get the mica tailings, which are supposed to contain the spodumene, going into the spodumene flotation section, first of all, the pH has to be adjusted to 10 so that you don't float micas. And if that pH isn't correct, then you'll start contaminating the spodumene float with micas. And with hindsight, it seems clear to me that pH management was not done adequately. Okay. So you have a lot of material that is floated, but you have cross-contamination with spodumene into mica and mica into spodumene. Yeah. Now, that should be able to be refloated with very good results coming out of it.
Okay.
That hasn't been done at this stage.
That hasn't been done at this stage. Okay. It's interesting.
Had not been done when I left the plant on Saturday morning.
Right. Okay. Yes. Because as per, I think what was perhaps discussed with Stark was they're saying that it has been visibly removed, but as far as you're aware, that's not been communicated to you. So I can maybe follow that up with them directly. Okay.
I think that in context, probably what was intended was to say that within the flotation chambers themselves, on product currently being floated, that problem has been resolved. And I think possibly that is the context that was intended to come across. You know, I don't know. I wasn't party to any of that kind of conversation. I don't know what was said.
No, neither was I.
You're quite right.
I will try to get some clarity on that, but that's still a good positive development nonetheless, if that is. Absolutely. I know you were waiting on on assays from what was already bagged. You're still waiting on them, are you? In a few days you'll get your lab going, but in terms of the official, you're still waiting on those assays, are you?
Yeah, I'm waiting on assays. You know, I've got mineralogical reports, which is the XRD that I have, and the mineralogical reports are tending to support what I've just said to you, that you tend to have cross-contamination with spodumene and mica contained in the same bag. So mineralogically, it's fine. But in terms of actual assay of how much lithium oxide equivalent is contained in each one of those, that will only resolve as our own atomic absorption system starts functioning now.
Okay.
Literally, it's installed now and is starting its function at the moment.
Okay. Good. Well, thank you for that, George. I want to just finish by talking about, of course, the ongoing situation with Canmax, but also the cash flow constraints, that kind of thing, and of course the general meeting that is coming up as well. Now, I know there's a couple of things on the table here. First of all, you've said you will cover short-term cash by way of a director loan, which would be about 1.7, which would then be funded by selling Prem shares and then repaid by issuing more shares at a later date. But of course, the general meeting is going ahead, just mid-August, I think, is it around the 12th of August? And again, you're seeking the preemptive rights, again, that weren't done in the last meeting that you had, which wasn't so long ago. So this is really to try and, well, back your position, isn't it, I suppose, that you are able to fund the ongoing costs without being held with a gun to your head, let's say, by Canmax. I mean, are you almost planning on keeping things ticking over with the cash flow situation until such time as you're producing and trying to keep your position strong? What's the real aim here?
Your question relates specifically to the disapplication, I think. Okay.
Yes.
So underlying the disapplication is exactly the same purpose as was the intent at the previous general meeting when this resolution was defeated and did not carry. And that is to make Premier master of its own destiny, and to take away the ability of, as was the case with Canmax, to put us in a position where we could find that we were potentially compromised in not being able to have a different source to liquidate a prepayment should that have been required. Now, in terms of the negotiations underway, the friendly negotiations at the moment, I'm hoping that will not be the case.
Okay.
But it's also, I think, good corporate governance that the company should have this ability, particularly as an AIM company, to, if necessary, go back to the market. So the intention is not to see a resolution passed and go out the next day and do a huge placing. That's the last thing I'm interested in doing. In fact, the fewer shares that are placed at the moment, the happier I am personally as a shareholder. So whilst Prem at some point must reimburse whatever shares I may have sold, that will need to be done. At the moment, I'm doing what I can from my director's position to keep the company at a point where it's meeting its essentials, and to keep us in what I think is a very strong position where we are attractive as much to Canmax as a producer of spodumene, which is what they want, as to other people. And there are many others who are in a conversation with us, as attractive as to them as well as a going concern producing spodumene. So that's what underlies what I am trying to do and why I'm doing what I am doing with the company. I might add that I'm restricted to that amount because of related party AIM regulations. It's worth just noting. Should it go any higher, then there are related party requirements. And there are some issues associated with related party because it's common knowledge that this requires the entire board to be involved. And we are aware that we do have a representative nominated director on our board. And it would be awkward to have that conversation there. So I think it's worth noting all of those things. I'm massively encouraged by the response that I'm seeing from our shareholders. I think that a vast proportion of our shareholders understand what we are trying to do, and that this is definitively in the best interests of the company to take away this overriding threat that can be held against us, to try and force us down a route that is not in the best interests of all our shareholders. Maybe in the best interests of some shareholders, but it's not in the best interests of all our shareholders, in my personal opinion.
Okay, so of course you would encourage shareholders to vote for that resolution clearly then, and this is purely, if you issue any shares, it would purely be to cover ongoing capex until you hit a stable production.
Well, yes, it is. But I think that the underlying this is the fact that if we have the ability, should the need arise, to cover a repayment to Canmax, should the need arise, and it has not arisen right now. Bear in mind, there's a force majeure in place. Bear in mind that in any event, even if there wasn't a force majeure, there would still be a 90-day window that would be in place
Yeah.
before
Okay.
any repayments or anything like that are
Okay.
needed. So none of this really applies at the moment, but to put us in a position where we know we cannot be held over a barrel again, and to have terms that we find are not appropriate, and various other issues that left us feeling that we were being coerced and into a corner.
Okay. Okay.
So it's all of that applies. In what I'm saying, I don't intend to imply in any way that we are not having constructive and friendly and polite and appropriate discussions with Canmax. We are, but we need to be in a position where we can approach these from a level playing field and not with one holding a gun at another one's head, as it
Sure. Indeed. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, okay. Of course, there are a number of sort of scenarios. One would hope that if the production starts successfully at Zulu, that Kanmax would then be happy, the force majeure could go away within the 14-week period, and all of this could go away. But of course, you have discussed about other interested parties here, and if you do have to keep things ticking along, I mean, is there a bit of sort of cat and mouse going on here? You try and keep things going, and and another month until Stark can get the production going, and hopefully then Canmax are happy.
Mark, I just want this plant to be in production, and I'm going to do every single thing that I conceivably can do to make sure this plant works. I do not like the force majeure situation. I do not believe that it will last longer than that window that I've given.
Okay.
I see what the solutions are, and they can be put in place pretty quickly. So my intention is to get them in place, get this thing going, get it producing, get it making money as soon as it possibly can. And I'll do whatever I have to do to achieve that objective.
Okay. Has there been any other discussions with other parties, George, or not?
Yes.
At this stage? There have. Okay, so there have been some serious discussions. I know you said there were a fair number, so there have been some serious discussions going on. Okay, well, that's good to hear as well. Just to finish off, George, with the lab on site, you commissioned hopefully in the not too distant future, in the next few days, I think you said earlier there, it should all be commissioned. You'll be looking to get assays from the plant, but also would you be looking to do assays from the ore, from the pit, from the EPO area?
Oh, yeah. Mark, let me just step back on the lab. We have a laboratory that was installed at site some time ago. What we did not have was the ability to do actual lithium assays directly. Mm-hmm. To do lithium assays involves multi-acid digestions. It involves some special equipment. It involves an atomic absorption system and so on. And this is difficult and expensive kit. We originally relied on a LIBS. The LIBS has simply not functioned as it should have. Okay. And eventually I insisted on a refund and took it. So it's not that the lab isn't there. The lab has already been doing particle size distribution analysis and moisture content analysis and all sorts of other stuff, plus the XRD, which determines the mineralogy of whatever's in the deposit. So it says so much spodumene, so much lepidolite, so much petalite, so much quartz, so much muscovite, whatever it might be. So the XRD is there, but the XRD is not a quantitative machine. It doesn't tell us specifically what the percentage of lithium is. So the introduction and the inclusion of the atomic absorption unit has been very recent, and this was installed late last week. The commissioning is ongoing. It requires one component which is being driven to site today. Okay. That's why I'm confident we'll have this thing working now properly in very short order. And yes, it will do analysis of everything from in situ grades through to all the components of the plant, through to concentrates, etc.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for clarifying that. Is there anything you would consider? Would you consider doing a DSO to get short-term cash flow, or is that not something you would really be thinking about at the moment?
I hadn't really put my mind to that until I started seeing the early results coming from the UV sorting. And I think that if all else failed, there would be a very good fallback position to take material that has been upgraded through the UV sorter and perhaps look at doing a DSO deal on that. I think
if needed,
that one could get a decent grade and you'd probably get quite a good price for it. It's consistently sized, it's clean.
Okay.
There are a whole lot of issues there. So, yeah, I haven't taken it any further other than to recognize it is an opportunity at this time.
Okay, if needed. Okay. And we're going to hear in a few days from Stark, hopefully, about what has actually been produced. From your perspective, it's a difficult question to answer, but do you feel it's going to be as they suggested before?
Mark, I'd rather not be drawn on that. I'm not at the plant at the moment. I really would rather not be drawn on that one.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll find out in a few days, hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay. Final question for you, George, of course, on the resource update statement. I know that's been with the regulators, but if it's taking a while to get approved by the regulators, how long do we realistically have to wait to get that? Will we ever see something?
Well, it's another one of the reasons why I came back here from Zulu over the weekend, was to chase up because there are a whole lot more assay results that are in. I know we haven't published, but there are a whole lot more. The other thing is that with some of the more recent stuff coming in, there are some good at depth extensions that are expected to add some tonnage to this thing. There's also been additional discoveries since we started in the pit that look as though it extends the deposit in a southeasterly direction beyond where we thought it was, plus other ongoing exploration. So one of the difficulties with it is that this thing never stands still. It's with every set of results, there's another change. And at what point in time does one actually stop and draw up the complete 43 or SAMREC compliant document that's like a little book that's got to be written about this to get it's through the approval process for publication and so on and so forth. So I'm back here to try and chase up that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time, George Roach, CEO of Premier African Minerals.
Mark, thank you.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.